to a chrome briefcase. Apparently the velvet box had been placed inside. A man who could have been a Mr. Smith clone from The Matrix, complete with black suit and dark sunglasses, escorted her out of the conference room. They exited through a back door on 58th Street. A few passing pedestrians gawked and pointed as they entered a limousine, which quickly pulled away. Julia could only marvel as the limo cruised through the most fashionable part of town. What a mission! She was certainly a long way from the vineyard in Napa Valley where she had grown up and worked since college. Had it really been almost a year since she'd traded the secure familiarity of home for the excitement and opportunities of the Big Apple? But where else could she advance a career in her dream occupation, jewelry design? At first, she didn't think a sales position at Pelham's would be much of a career stepping stone, but she needed an income, and she got the job after one interview. She was told that she looked the part. A spitting image of Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, said the human resources interviewer. And until she found something better, swiping platinum cards and tying up those little sage boxes at least paid the rent on the tiny two-bedroom she shared with Douglas in the East Village. And now she was on her way to meet the princess of New York high society, Pelham's creative director-to-be, the head of every junior committee, the party picture darling who was a celebutante even Julia's pals back home knew about. It was a little weird that her boss's boss was about her age, maybe a couple of years older, but Julia knew how the family business game was played. She figured she'd be dining out on the tail of her critical wedding day delivery for weeks to come. It was only after she stepped out of the limo that she wondered, why me? There were several other more senior girls who could have been chosen to bring Lel her jewels, and heck, Julia wasn't even in the PR department. Why had they chosen a salesgirl from the engagement ring section for such an important task? Gene Pelham studied his stunning daughter as the makeup artist caressed the final dollop of blush onto her cherry cheeks. He was as emotional as he'd ever been, which was not very. The bottom line is this, sweetie. To whom much has been given, much will be expected. That's what Rose Kennedy used to say to her kids all the time, and let me tell you, it's good to remember. Teddy used to tell me constantly. God, Teddy and I had some fun times back in the day. You'll see him tonight. The Schlossbergs can't make it, but they want to take you to dinner as soon as you're back from your honeymoon. They were really apologetic. Did I tell you about the time Teddy, Frank Sinatra, and I were all on the boat in the Riviera? That Angie Dickinson. Yeah, well, I probably shouldn't tell you that, seeing as you're my daughter. And don't believe what you hear about me and Teddy on the vineyard. Father, Lel said, rolling her eyes, I've heard these stories 1,000,000 times. Could you give them a rest? It's my wedding day. You're right, sweetie, of course. Anyway, what I wanted to say is that now that you're getting married, you have a responsibility to properly represent the Pelham family. You're a crucial part of the business, and that's why I made you creative director. Let's face it, the future of the company's going to be up to you, kiddo. Your brothers are useless. Lel's brother Augustus, 23, was completing his 5th year at the University of Colorado at Boulder with a major in women's studies, a.k.a. studying women, up close. His minor was botany. Translation, pot smoking. 20-year-old Duke, a sophomore who was keg-standing his way through Lake Forest, had expressed little interest in the family biz. Lel's father had been the same way at their age. Once quite dashing and known as a wild playboy who threw famous parties with celebrities and beautiful people, he had only ever planned on living off of the fruits of the business that his Russian great-grandfather had built up from a small counter in the Diamond District to a world-famous New York institution. Until fate intervened. His older brother Martin, the heir apparent with a head for business, was killed in a plane crash on his way to the opening of a Pelham's in Dubai. Gene had no choice but to settle down and take the reins. 28-year-old Eleanor Lel Pelham was the oldest child of Gene and his wife, Emily Waingard Pelham, a Philadelphia mainline wasp who was dropped from the social register when she married jet-setting Gene. Though her parents nearly had coronaries when their daughter became engaged, she didn't care. Emily was drawn to Gene's blush-inducing, loud, animated stories and his suave confidence. But that was then, in her youth. Now she had regressed toward a temperament more approaching her mother's icy reserve. While Jean loved the limelight and the glitzy aspects that his job as CEO of Pelham's allowed him, Emily had become his polar opposite. Taciturn, uptight, and disapproving. She refused almost all social engagements and spent most of her time gardening at their mansion in Washington, Connecticut. The result was that Lel possessed a combination of her mother's aloofness and reserve, as well as her father's insatiable appetite for mixing with glamorous folk. It made for an interesting dichotomy. "Jean, Lel has to get ready," said Emily, entering the dressing room of Lel's suite and shooting Jean an annoyed look. I know. We're just having a little father-daughter chat before I give my baby away to that rascal." "Dad." Just kidding, hon. You know we love Willoughby." "He's perfect for you," said her mother, then added, "and us." "He is the best." Lel's feelings for her mother vacillated between hero worship and hatred, but she was elated to have made a match with a suitor that her mother approved of so heartily and vocally. "He better be, is what I'm saying, 'cause I just moved $50 million into his hedge fund," Jean teased. "Must we discuss money now?" Emily's tone was full of irritation. "Well, I want Lel to know about money and these things. Look, you're protected by the prenup. I had a serious talk with Willoughby last week and let him know there will be no nonsense. It's ironclad. The money is in your name, and it's a premarital asset. Of course, I'll have access to it now. I figured you kids needed more money to get started." "Thanks, Daddy." "And I want you to close on an apartment as soon as you get back. Now that you'll be Mrs. Willoughby Banks, you need to live at a serious address, Park Avenue." "You're preaching to the choir. But, Dad, can we talk about this later? I need to get ready." "Certainly, sweetie." "Jean, why don't you go find Gus and Duke?" said Emily. "Make sure they're dressed and don't let them be late." "Righto." When Lel's father left, the bride stood up to take a look at herself in the mirror. She took a deep breath with a slow, paced exhale. So this was it. She was a striking young woman, 5'7", with long dark hair and crystal blue eyes. Her skin was that creamy color that looks wonderful with a tan, and Lel had just spent a week lying by the pool at her house in Jamaica in order to look perfectly bronzed for the big day. She would have been smashing, walking down the aisle in just the ivory slip that she was wearing, or even a burlap sack, for that matter. But she'd look spectacular in the gown that a dozen seamstresses had spent hours on. Carolina Herrera herself was scheduled to make the final adjustments before Lel sported it down the aisle. "You will be a beautiful bride, Eleanor." "Thanks, Mom. Willoughby is a catch." "I know." The women shared a contented smile before Emily went to check in with the event planners. Part of Lel's attraction to Will had been her mother's early enthusiasm for the match. All of Lel's previous suitors had been greeted with disdain, but her mother had brightened at the mere sight of Will when Lel had him come to a dinner with her parents at Elio's 2 years ago. At first she'd loved to rebel by parading her suitors, disheveled artists in dire need of good haircuts or Brooklyn-based musicians with ear piercings before her horrified mother. It had been great to see her squirm. She'd gone so far as to taunt her mother by mentioning marriage or out-of-wedlock babies in a life in the East Village. But deep down, beneath the mother-daughter catfight, Lel wanted her mother to worship her choice. She wanted to choose the kind of man Emily would wish she had chosen, instead of her scene-loving husband. That was Will to a T. The unanimous word used to describe Will was charming. He knew at once how to endear himself to Mrs. Pelham, and that was to be the slightest bit snobby, and to treat Mr. Pelham with the smallest hint of patronization and derision. Mrs. Pelham thus felt that he was her brethren. The fact that the Banks family was very similar to the Waingards was just the icing on the cake. Sometimes Lel felt that it was her mother who should be marrying Will. Too bad. "Here comes the bride!" boomed Polly Meacox, Lel's matron of honor, as she burst into the room in her port wine Vera Wang dress. She was followed by the other bridesmaids, Hope Matthews, Meredith Knight, and Lel's formerly fat cousin, Samantha Waingard. "Are you so psyched?" asked Hope. "Hell yeah," said Lel with confidence. "I gave my very last blowjob last night." "Lel!" gasped Hope. What?
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.